Hello and welcome to the Harrogate podcast with me, Andrew Gray. My job is to interview and to deconstruct the movers and shakers in the Harrogate area and the surrounding villages and towns. Today I'm absolutely delighted to have with me local celebrity, no less, than Keith Tordoff, MBE. Now, where do I begin with describing Keith, who he is and what he has done? Well, I'll give it this go. Presently, he's the proprietor of the oldest sweet shop in the UK, which is in Paley Bridge. He's the chair of the Nidderdale Chamber of Trade. On top of that, Keith is the chair of Pateley Bridge in Bloom. But there's much more to Keith than that. He's the patron of Dementia Forward in Ripon. He's a former policeman. In fact, he was the first person on the scene of one of the Yorkshire Ripper's first murders in 1975. He was also a former bank manager, would you believe it? Not. And in 2018, in the Queen's Birthday Honours list, he was awarded MBE for his services, I think, to Nidderdale, when we'll come on to that in a moment. As well as that, Keith was, as he just told me, a Channel 4 presenter on one of the culinary programmes with some celebrities whose names escapes me right now. Keith, have I done you justice in describing you? Have I missed anything off there?
Well, absolutely done me justice, thank you, Andrew. But I'm sure there's many other things that would be included if we were to be doing my autobiography.
Well, you've got as long as you like today. I'm very grateful that you've come in from Pateley Bridge to see me. I know you've got a speaking engagement later on in Acomb, so we're lucky to have you. Now, talk to my listeners, please, about your sort of special relationship with Pateley Bridge, because I know that you're now in your sort of early 60s, but you've been visiting Pateley Bridge, I think, since a child. Tell me when this sort of love affair with Pateley Bridge commenced.
Well, I'm somebody who is from Leeds, and as a Leeds lad, our holidays were a trip out, and our trip out was going to be somewhere like Pateley Bridge or the coast, because you didn't go long distances, never went abroad until I was a lot older and living by myself. So holidays to Pateley Bridge were mainly because my brother was into geology, and there's the lead mines around Nidderdale, and he used to go and love exploring lead mines. Now, that wasn't really my barrow, so I used to like going to the sweet shop on Pateley Bridge High Street and getting sweets. So that was what enticed me or made me happy to go along on these journeys out with my brother, and I've got an older sister as well, going to Pateley Bridge, days out rather than holiday.
So which year would it be that you first went to Pateley Bridge then, do you think?
Well, I would imagine it would be in the 60s. I'm born in the 1950s, so I would have thought early 60s.
And can you remember what it was like back then? How do you remember it?
Well, the high street itself to me hasn't really changed, because it's still that little narrow high street, lots of independent shops, and if looking at photographs which I have done from 100 years ago, nothing seems to have changed in Leicester High Street. And the hills of course haven't, and the lead mines that you can see the funnels coming from them haven't changed, and that's where my brother used to go exploring, and I think I just used to be messing around while he was looking for his bits of iron ore or whatever it was, lead ore, so yeah.
So it seems that it was destined that you were going to live in Pateley Bridge, but it took you some time to get there. Will you talk me through your early years? Because I mentioned you were in the police for many years. Talk to me about that period of time.
Yeah, a normal education. I went to a secondary modern school, whereas my brother and sister both went to grammar school, passed their 11 plus. I failed my 11 plus, so I went to
Look at you now.
So I went to a secondary modern school, always more interested in doing things. I was a bit of a daydreamer in class, so I used to enjoy more going outside. I was looking out that classroom window, just really looking forward to getting out at the breaks, getting out at the end of the day. I enjoyed my childhood, great fun, going off in the woods, playing football in the local park, etc. And getting taken to the sweet shop, of course. Sweet shops on every corner of every street in those days, virtually. Growing up, I started working in Leeds Market when I was about 15, a Saturday job, Brooksbank's fruit and veg store. I think it was either row 4 or 5, not the best of memories as you can tell. Serving on the veg store mainly, there was a nut stall to it, but I used to be on serving the potatoes, I think. So one of the things was emptying the sacks of spuds out, building the potatoes up to have this fantastic display, which was putting one potato on top of another. And the thing with that was that because it was a market, you got some real characters. So some would come along during the day, especially when they had a drink at lunchtime, and pull potato out of the bottom of the pile so it'd all collapse, and you couldn't go after them because you were stood behind counter and it'd taken ages to get after them. But from that I saved up to buy my own little car. So when I was 17 I'd already bought a VW Beetle, shiny red one, immaculate condition, can even remember the registration number, SBH 300D, and loved that car, pride and joy. And it was a bit unusual then to have a car because everybody associates cars now that everybody can have one when they're 17. They didn't as 17-year-olds when I had mine, and that's when I met my wife Gloria, who's she was 16, I was 17 with my car. It's maybe because I had a car that she fancied me.
Probably.
And so guess what? I used to take her out on our day trips to Pateley Bridge to go and visit the sweet shop when I was 17, because I had my own car to do it then.
Goodness, and you've been together ever since, is it 40 odd years?
Well, I think it'll be 46 years this year that we've been together.
That is amazing in itself, actually. You don't come across many people who married that long. Well done. But after the market, which clearly was an influential time in your life, and you've picked up, I think, some of the characteristics from some of the characters that I think came to the market, because you have that all-encompassing, happy, brilliant personality.
Well, you've got to have a bit of character, because you might have started off a little bit typical schoolboy, pretty shy, but suddenly old man Brooksbank, as I called him, who ran the business, come on, get them potatoes sold, so suddenly you're shy. Come on, ladies, come on, get your potatoes now. So you're shouting out as people were walking past, and it was a bit of fun as well.
So how did you end up then joining the police? Doesn't seem like an obvious trajectory from the market to the police force.
It might not have done, but at school, the only thing I wanted to do and could think of that I wanted to do was to join the police force. And nobody'd even remember it now, but whilst I was still at school and still working in Leeds Market, I joined something called the Leeds City Police Auxiliary Cadets, which aren't even full cadets. It was something that you did when you were at school, and I used to go along to the police headquarters in Leeds to learn about policing while I was still at school.
And what was it that enticed you about the policing? Was it to following rules? Was it locking up bad guys? Was it following your nose? What was it?
I suppose it's like people want to be a firefighter, people want to be a nurse, people want to be a doctor. I wanted to be a policeman. I think it was something must have influenced me along the way. I'm not sure what it was really. Maybe my run-ins with police on mischievous night, when I used to do naughty things like light bangers and throw them and things like that when you shouldn't have been letting fireworks off before bonfire night, and got chased by a policeman who then said, "Where do you live?" And I just lived about 100 yards away, and took me back home, and frightened to death, of course, but it maybe an experience of having been dealt with by the police, and thought, yeah, I'd like to do it. I really don't know the answer to that, Andrew, but I just had something that I wanted to be in a police, and I followed that course by an auxiliary cadet, unpaid, and then at 17 I became Leeds City Police, a full-time employed police cadet.
Can you remember your first day on the beat?
I can remember my first day as a police cadet, because that's when I met Gloria. The very first day we were both there in this classroom, arrived spick and span, and I sat towards the back because I'd always been a bit of a daydreamer at school, so not into the academic sides, listening carefully. And then they said, we're going to hand some forms out for you to fill in, and I suddenly realised I hadn't brought a pen with me. That's unbelievable. But I tapped this young lady on the shoulder in front of me and said, can you let me have a pen? And that was Gloria, who from that moment onwards went on to obviously go out with.
Lovely story. And then from there, so how did you progress through the police? Because you had a long and varied career.
Yeah, two years as a cadet, and then at the age of 19, on my birthday month, May, appointed a full police constable. So suddenly, and again, a bit of an advantage because I had my own car, I'd passed my test at 17. A lot of police didn't have cars. They used to arrive at the police stations on the push bikes, on the Honda, mopeds, etc. And it was real senior officers who might have a car. When I rolled up in my shiny red Beetle, people were wondering, who's this turning up in a car? And because of that, within 3 months, I was put on a one-day driving course and authorised to drive police panda cars, which was rapid in those days. So 3 or 4 months down the road from joining, I'm suddenly driving cars. Always short-staffed, so I was actually out there by myself in at the thick end, and you learn rather fast when you're getting sent to incidents because you can drive and you're by yourself in a police car. I did later go on a full training driver course.
That's reassuring.
Yeah, it is really. But I'd passed this one-day test, which was amazing. So became police constable. Everybody had to do 2 years probation working on the beat, which I did. Sometime after that, I applied to join something called Task Force, which was, in those days, I suppose, was classed a bit like the Metropolitan Special Patrol Group, rent-a-mob, so football matches, riot situations, riot shield training, and at that point trained to be a firearms officer as well, shooting or using the old Smith & Wesson .38 handgun.
That sounds like something from a Dirty Harry movie.
Yeah, well, it was a bit like that, to be honest with you, when you look back at it. And later I became trained to use the shotgun as well, because you had to take a separate test for using a shotgun. The idea of the shotgun was for various things, either killing escaped beasts or firing through an engine block of a car, because the cartridge you used had like a big ball bearing in the end that would go through an engine block or kill a runaway bull or something like that.
So I imagine then you were policing the streets of Leeds and the football team of Leeds in the 80s then, would that be right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was covering the whole of Leeds, and later it did amalgamate, did the Leeds City Police Force, so it became the West Yorkshire Metropolitan Police. So at that stage I was suddenly going to Wakefield on training courses, because that's where the headquarters for the police was for the West Yorkshire Metropolitan Force, and covering other areas in Task Force where there were problems, so Leeds, Bradford, Huddersfield, Wakefield, drawn into those areas wherever there was a problem or a major incident, and that's how policing was effective.
Can you remember any particular riots that you had to police?
I certainly remember a lot of trouble at football matches that we used to get involved in. Riot-wise, I was taken off to other areas to help cover, so I did actually go to other police force areas where there was riots and things which I was involved in.
So that might have been then during the miners' strike, perhaps a little later?
That's a little bit later as the miners' strike, and I actually at that point had gone into the CID, the Criminal Investigation Department, so I wasn't directly involved with the miners' strike or the policing of that. That was a little bit later.
Yeah, you think you might have sort of dodged a bullet then, perhaps. Now, you might not want to answer this question, and by all means dodge this one, Keith, but I did say in my introduction that you were one of the first officers, if not the first officer, to attend the very sad and obviously tragic murder of the first Yorkshire Ripper murders in Leeds. I think it was it Scott Hall Road, was it?
It was actually Scott Hall Avenue, which is in Leeds, and 1975, young police officer. This was early on before Task Force, when I am there as this policeman who can drive a Panda car because I've got a driving licence, and we received a call early in the morning. I think we'd started at 6 a.m. in the morning, so it was sometime just after that, fairly early on. It was a milkman who called in to say that he'd found a body on Scott Hall Playing Fields, which is just off Scott Hall Avenue, and I attended, and I was basically one of the first officers to attend, and unfortunately it was the body of Wilma McCann, which is classed as one of the first Ripper victims, Yorkshire Ripper victims. Subsequently I went to the house of the victim, which was actually, she was virtually to the rear of it on this playing field, so she virtually at the back of where she lived. Went to that house where the children were all in one room keeping warm from a gas stove, and that was, you know, obviously very sad altogether, the whole scenario, and it went on to become the Ripper. That's when I went into Task Force later, that I actually was then, as part of our role, we were brought onto any murder that happened. So if one happened in Halifax or Bradford, we were immediately contacted, drafted into work on those. So I worked on a lot of the Ripper murders in that period of time.
Could you explain to my listeners, and to me, because I wasn't born during that time, what it was like, particularly for women who wanted to go out and about, particularly in the evening, in the Leeds area? What was that like? I mean, did people go out? Would they lock in their doors? What was the vibe like at that time?
It totally changed the makeup of a whole city, not just a city really, the whole county, because they were striking throughout West Yorkshire and later Manchester, and the streets became deserted on an evening. And it was so unusual. You go through an area such as Leeds where the university is, and now you would go through and there'll be students at all times of night and walking around. Then the streets were deserted virtually, and really just quirk of fate, I suppose. I'd later left Task Force, returned to uniform duties, and in the early 80s I received a call in the morning again on the radio that a bank manager just parked his car on the top of the Arndale Centre at Headingley. He looked over the ramp as he was walking down to where he worked, saw what he thought was either a body or a tailor's dummy, that's how he called it in. And I was first on the scene of that particular murder. That was Jacqueline Hill, a student, and she'd come home on the late night bus to the Arndale Centre. She was walking to her student lodgings up Alma Road, and it obviously attacked her as she was getting near to her accommodation, found on this little area of waste ground just under the ramp to the car park of the Arndale Centre at Edding. So I was first on the scene. As a result of that, for continuity, I stayed with the body, went to the mortuary, did the ID of the body with the parents, and later gave evidence at Leeds Coroner's Court about how the body was discovered and what had taken place.
How has this affected you in your life? Because clearly you've got such acute memory of this period of time as you would, but I would have thought it's something that a lot of people would want to bury and maybe not talk about, like perhaps what happened in like World War II. Soldiers that came back often didn't talk about what they'd seen, and you'd experienced something not dissimilar to that. How have you coped with that period in your life?
Well, it was certainly a different way of coping with things back then. I also worked in something called Vice School at the time, so we used to deal with all the assaults on quite often children, babies being battered. So I've dealt with some horrific cases, and certainly in CID, murder-wise, I think. So you had to cope, because I don't think the mechanisms were really in place then in terms of mental health care in relation to the welfare of officers. Yes, there were the police treatment centre, which you've got in Harrogate, which is still there doing a fantastic job, but not to the extent that it most probably would be now. And certainly there was a different way of coping. I think, dare to say it, sometimes humour played a part in getting you through these situations. Sometimes it was a case of going home and reflecting on it yourself, and I can still visualise a lot of these situations. As daft as it sounds, I can still visualise unfortunately the body of Will McCann, of Jacqueline Hill. Certain ones, even though I've seen lots of dead bodies and people who've been attacked, etc., certain ones, for whatever reason, do stay in your memory, and whether your memory's factual in what it's remembering, but I can certainly imagine even now visualising the body on Scott Hall playing field slightly on the slope as it was laid, etc., and Jacqueline Hill just as she was found.
Keith, you look almost pale talking about it, because my listeners won't know what your facial expression's like, but it has sort of changed your manner when you answer it, talking about it. I mean, we can move on if...
No, I mean, I don't mind. I say you do have a certain, as you almost probably recognise, you have a certain amount of emotion because of those situations, and you can't get away from that. But no counselling, no nothing in those days, and say you had to get on with your life, and you had to get on with the next job, and that's really, I suppose, what I've done in life, and all these challenges I've kept moving forward.
And let's move forward to the next phase in your life, because I think you became everyone's favourite, a bank manager, when bank managers were popular, I guess, or not.
This was after I left police. I went to study for a law degree at Leeds Metropolitan University. I didn't actually complete the course because I decided, again, this goes back to my schooling days. I suddenly realised I'm not academic, I'm not really suited for this classroom type environment. So I actually got the opportunity of going to work for the Bank of Scotland, and although the title is bank manager I was given, it was a very unusual and flexible role, covering a large part of the north of England, not working in a bank branch, and to do with obviously the side of investigation with my CID background, and to do with more the debt side of recovery side of the banking business. Very flexible, a great role, because what was I doing again? I was travelling around, meeting people, interviewing people, very much as I'd have done when I was in the police as a detective.
Yeah, I can imagine a very similar role indeed. So how on earth did you end up owning the oldest sweet shop in the world? And from, police, then sort of fraud bank role, how did you get there? What's the next stage in your life?
Well, sweets have been a constant theme, as I said, from childhood.
And you brought sweets in today?
Of course, you've got to take sweets everywhere you go. That's the one thing. I always carry a bag full in my car because people expect it once I'm going anywhere to get some sweets. So Yeah, this theme has run through my life. So when I first met Gloria and I took her to my local sweet shop at Meanwood Road in Leeds in those days in this shiny red car, there was some youth hanging around. I didn't want to get damaged, so I actually said to my wife, would you mind, she wasn't my wife then, she was my girlfriend of course, would you mind going in and getting me sweets? And I gave her a list of what I wanted, which were still my favourites really, jelly beans, licorice torpedoes, teeth, you know, the milk gum teeth thing, and various sweets which I still love to this day, chocolate raisins. And of course I sent her in, or asked her if she'd go into the shop. She came back out and she said, as soon as I started ordering sweets, the lady in the shop said, are they for Keith Tordoff? So I had this reputation. I knew every sweet shop on when I was a policeman, because I used to stop off at little sweet shops on the corners and buy a bag of sweet. The police officer I worked with, when they used to be allocated to work with me, as soon as we got out in the car, they used to say, give us a sweet Tordy, because some call me Tordy, cutting my surname Tordoff down. So I had this reputation to do with sweet. Love sweet things, still do. Because I'd visited the old sweet shop, cutting a long story short, been visiting it when I was still working for the bank, etc., spoken to the lady who ran the shop and said, look, if you're ever thinking about selling this shop, I'd love to buy it. Because I knew this was the oldest sweet shop in the whole of this country, because it's traded since 1827, which is 192 years this year. The building's actually even older, 400 years old. Didn't have a lot of jars of sweets, and this lady ran it by herself. Again, cutting a long story short, I got a call that the lady unfortunately had been taken ill. She'd contacted me because I left my details. This was on Thursday. By the following Tuesday I'd bought the shop, no books, no nothing, and this is over 20 years ago now, although I've worked for the bank in that time as well, because my wife, it was a very quiet business to start with, so my wife was running it. It got a certain amount of press coverage because it was the oldest in this country. In 2012 we got a call from well-known publications saying we're researching to try and find the oldest continuous train sweet shop in the whole world. That was Guinness World Records, who in 2014 published us as the oldest sweet shop in the world at little old Pateley Bridge.
And has that been good for business? I imagine it has.
Absolutely. Got a lot of media coverage, many TV programmes which are syndicated around the world. So we get visitors from Australia, New Zealand. We had a family from Delhi a couple of weeks ago, had seen us on TV out in Delhi. They'd come to this country, they were going to Edinburgh, to London, York, and little old Pateley Bridge, because they'd seen about the oldest sweet shop and they had to come there.
What did they buy?
Well, they obviously ask you about sweets, so you've got to sell them Yorkshire mixture, because they're in Yorkshire, and that's a selection of boilings, and always got to be served with a fish in it. That's just a tradition. So Pontefract cakes, of course, this connection with Pontefract in West Yorkshire, licorice, which has a massive history behind it, introduced to Pontefract by the Dominican monks around Pontefract Castle in the 14th century, and later sugar added to the licorice product to make the sweet that we know now as a Pontefract cake. So it's a whole fascinating area. We've had massive amount of TV coverage, whether it be BBC, ITV, Sky. We've filmed with Robbie Coltrane, Paul Hollywood, Nigel Slater, Eric Knowles, Claire Balding came last year. Numerous TV appearances, numerous people presented on Channel 4, Food Unwrapped, regarding licorice as a subject. So all these experiences, and it's a little sweet shop in a rural area in the heart of Yorkshire.
That everybody knows about. You've done a very good job of publicising it, and well done. And I suppose with all that publicity that you generated for the shop, the whole of the area has benefited, hasn't it? It's just not just you. I can see that you've done it for everybody, which takes me nicely into your stewardship, I think, of the Chamber of Trade, the Nidderdale Chamber of Trade. Yeah, I believe you've had 2 stints at it. Will you talk me through your stints as the chair?
Yeah, when I arrived in Nidderdale, because our son, we decided to move from Leeds with our son when he was due to change secondary school, and we thought a nice rural school, Nidderdale High School, just be right for him, because I suppose he follows a little bit in my footsteps, not necessarily academic, but a school that would suit and work for him when we saw Nidderdale as that. So we actually moved out to Nidderdale. We'd already got the sweet shop. We're travelling from Leeds to actually operate it, or my wife was. The shop itself, with the media coverage, started to get busier, and as a result of that, I was spending more and more time at the shop. Really, it's evolved as the shop, but when I arrived in Nidderdale, we joined the Chamber of Trade as a business, very small organisation with less than 20 members at that time. This is most probably around 97, 98 time. 1998, and I joined that. Within no time, somebody must have recognised that I might be the person to take on the chairmanship as a presidency, as it was then. It was a fancy title of President of the Nidderdale Chamber of Trade. So I took it on around 1998, set up the website for the area, the nidderdale.co.uk website, which still carries on today for the benefit of the businesses and community. Initiatives such as finger posts, the first in the whole country, which identified individual businesses rather than one that said to museums and council offices, etc. Welcome to Nidderdale signs at strategic points as you drive into Nidderdale from different areas around, and took it on, went into it heart and soul, helped with a resource centre that was attached to the high school for people to use computers, because computers again were relatively in their infancy, and certainly the internet was in around 99-2000. Did it for about 7 years, held a farmers market, the first in the district, organised various events, and I suppose I burnt out a bit, if I'm honest with you, and after 7 years said to my wife, that's enough, I'm not doing that again. And that was my first stint.
Why did you go back?
Running a business, I started to see, as everywhere has around the country, the decline of the high street, and Pateley Bridge wasn't going to be exempt from it. And we suddenly started to get empty shops appearing. Nobody was taking on the leases on them. So they were sat there for 12 months, 18 months, 2 years. The street starting to look untidy, dirt, rubbish. And before long, we had 12 empty shops. Looked like it was going to be a case of last man standing, do we get out? And I think that was going through a lot of businesses' minds, the ones that were remaining. And I thought, I can actually do something about this. So I decided that I would stand to take on the chair of the Nidderdale Chamber of Trade again, which was about 6 to 7 years ago. Took it on. Very fortunate at this stage. I've now got Kirsty, Kirsty Shepherd, my son's partner, who'd been in the business. She'd met my son Alexander at school. I've only just the one son. Both came to work in the business straight from school. So Kirsty's very, very good with the computer, so she could suddenly do the social media side of things, and that made a massive difference. So suddenly we started doing very basic initiatives such as the Facebooks, the Twitter, all the things that I don't really understand, if I'm honest with you, Andrew.
Podcasting in particular, I know we had to explain to you how it worked before we began this podcast.
So, but I'd got Kirsty, my left arm virtually, because without her it wouldn't be the same. So, and I suppose, sounds a little bit conceited, but with my leadership and my personality to take things forward, started doing simple initiatives which don't cost money.
And I was in Pateley Bridge recently, and in fact I bumped into you. Well, how could you not bump into you in Pateley Bridge? But the place was teeming. It was a Saturday a couple of weeks ago, so it would be sort of early October, late September 2019. And the shops looked great. There was flowers everywhere. The car park was rammed like I've never seen it. There was no event on. It was just, it was a nice day, but it wasn't the nicest of days. It was fabulous. And a lot of this is, I would think, down to you, I would say. So talk us through all the events that you've led in Pateley.
Don't rely on funding, because it can take a long time to apply for, and quite often you're unsuccessful. I've learnt that from my first stint in the Chamber of Trade. You've got to get businesses involved. You've got to get the community involved. You've got to put money into it from these sources if you can, because going through the other avenues, to be quite frank with you, can waste you a lot of time. So I realised 12 empty shops, we need to do something rapidly. Bunting, secret weapon, get some lovely bunting across that high street. Looks like something's happening. People start pulling up who are driving through thinking there must be something taking place here. So when those people have gone to the car and they come into my shop and say, what's going on? I've seen bunting. You say, we've put it out to welcome you.
Very good. It does work. I never thought that. Bunting is a secret weapon. I think you're the only person on earth that's ever to have put that in a sentence until now.
It is a secret weapon for anywhere. Put some bunting. It suddenly brings the place alive. Start doing 1 or 2 floral arrangements in tubs and planters outside business premises. Encourage businesses to do it. Suddenly the place starts looking traffic. Try and lead by example. Sweep up outside your premises. Hopefully other people will sweep up outside theirs. Dog walkers and people, try and, if somebody does allow the dog to foul, say, oh, you've obviously not brought a black bag with you, would you like one from my shop? So make sure that you keep on top of things. Suddenly you change the mindset of people, and suddenly things start to look good. Publicity helps, of course, and working with local radio stations, the local newspaper to highlight what you're trying to do. Then I started to organise events. Never been to a 1940s event in my life, but I heard about them, so I thought, right, we'll organise one. We organised 1940s. Because I haven't done one before, I maybe brought things to it that people haven't done before, which is, we said, right, as businesses, let's lay on for people who come as reenactors, proper uniforms, not something maybe they bought off eBay, but something where they've gone to a lot of trouble and the ladies have dressed up nicely. We'll walk around when they're here, give them a ration voucher to go and get a free cup of tea and a sandwich, free sandwich.
Genius idea, well done.
So suddenly there's that goodwill created. People went away from that event talking about how warmly they've been welcomed by Pateley Bridge. Not concentrated on a showground or one area where people stay if they've gone there for the day. Bring the trail to go around the whole area, so it goes on the high street, it goes into shops, it goes into churches, it goes into schools, so that people go around the trail and everybody benefits and everybody sees this buzz. So it's about looking at things differently, having a bit of vision. And we did this, and proud to say that we then people started to take on shops. At the moment, we've no empty shops on the high street. We got voted in 2016 in the government competition best high street in the country, the best high street in the whole of the country. Phenomenal achievement. Really proud of that. Sunday Times started to obviously pick up on the best high streets. They do a feature, the best places to live in the country. Suddenly we were named as one of the best places, Pateley Bridge, one of the best places in the north of England to live. So that was suddenly there. We decided, having won the award for the best high street, what can we now do? We've got to keep people engaged that we've started working with the schools, the churches, the fire service, all these people. Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's enter Yorkshire in Bloom, which hadn't been entered for about 20 years by Pateley Bridge.
Why not? And what happened?
Guess what? Last year we won every title across the board for Yorkshire, and we've been asked to represent the whole of Yorkshire in the National Britain in Bloom competition, which we're waiting for the outcome of in October, the end of this month. And we've had a real phenomenal journey with it, because we got followed last year by the BBC, who did a programme, Britain in Bloom, on BBC Two. We went out as episode 1, series 2. So we'd created things last year that we were going to do for them, including clearing some church grounds at the Catholic Church just outside Pateley Bridge, where there was a footpath, where there was a grotto with the Virgin Mary, which hadn't been seen. The local priest who worked from that church didn't even know it existed on his church land. Great guy, but working with the church, we cleared that, exposed the grotto, beautiful views across the valley, created a wildflower meadow on an area of ground which was very overgrown under the bridge over the River Nidd, one of the first things you see. By hand cleared that, did a wildflower meadow, and I say won every title across Yorkshire. We're now Sunday Times 3 years in a row being named one of the best places to live in the country, best high street in the country.
You're showing off. I'm going to stop you there. Because there must be some negatives to living out in the sticks, particularly around there. You know, the transport at winter. You know, as wonderful a place as it is, it's one of my favourite places to go is Pateley Bridge, certainly. But you don't have total variety. For example, just to pick a random area, you don't have any lawyers. The banks are closed. Surely it's also a challenging place to live in many respects. And there's rural poverty, there's crime, there's a reduction in policing. The roads aren't particularly in a good neck. I'm not, of course, in no way I'm sort of blaming you. I'm just saying that surely there are some downsides to living in that neck of the world, or maybe not. Do tell me, what are the pros and cons?
Wherever you are in the world, Andrew, there's downsides to living in any part of the world. People think London's wonderful, and look at all the problems and issues they've got at the moment, so that wouldn't necessarily appeal to me. So if we look at Nidderdale as an area, wow, what a fantastic area, what a fantastic place to live. And if you're fortunate enough to be able to work there as well, even more so. We're not travelling in lots of traffic to get to our office or to our place of work. We've got fantastic independent shops where we've got wonderful produce, you know, butchers where we can get fantastic quality pies and meats and things, independent bakeries, cafes, restaurants, pubs, Michelin-starred restaurants.
I think it might have lost its Michelin star.
The York Arms has just been announced that they've lost the Michelin star, but they've held it for a lot of years. It hasn't changed. It's still top notch. It's just obviously somebody looking at. They might have had a napkin out of place when judges came to judge it, or a knife that was facing the wrong way. But Francis Atkins is an amazing chef, an amazing personality, a great supporter of what happens in Nidderdale. So when you say about the downside, when we get challenges with transport, the Harrogate Bus Company deciding they want to try and withdraw bus service, that's when I come in, because I then get hold of the Chief Executive Harrogate Bus Company, Alex Hornby, and say to him, Alex, this bus, we ain't losing it, we want it. What do we do to have to keep it? Everything comes down to money. So guess what? We work with him and raise that money through donations from people, from businesses. So we keep bus services running, and that's what we've done. That's what I've been involved in. We've created new summer bus services last year through working with the Dales and Bowland Bus Company, who are a charity, but who have laid on summer services for the first time, which come from West Yorkshire. So giving access to people in West Yorkshire who possibly wouldn't get to the Dales because they can't drive for various reasons, and we're opening the countryside to people, access to the countryside, delivered practically, not through some massive organisation or through lots of funding, through passionate people who are determined and who will make it happen. And that's the difference. And I'm a great believer in that. So coming back to what you said, wow, if you wanted to find anywhere to live in the country, you'd be as well coming to Nidderdale, where we make things happen, we look after people, we make sure we've got the service and resources, we try to reduce crime because we all work together. So we don't want the problems of drug county lines coming there. Yes, they will come along, but let's all keep our eyes and ears open, and let's be bold enough to stand up to these people and these situations and say, no, it ain't going to happen here. And I suppose it's the same as when I was policing. People who used to, in the wealthier, more affluent areas of Leeds, used to get the best security systems. The burglar would go along, look for the house without that security system and break into that. So that's maybe because they could do that because of wealth. We can do it in a rural community because if we all look after each other and with the eyes and ears for each other, we can actually be strong because we can isolate these people, make it so it is difficult for them to even want to travel into Nidderdale and Pateley Bridge to commit crime. This is an uncomfortable area. We don't want to be there. And I could achieve that throughout North Yorkshire. I could create that throughout the whole of this land because we need practical people who can direct and lead.
Keith, you're speaking like a potential politician. Are you?
I clearly have something running through my DNA, through my body, which is hopefully doing good, trying to do things for people, working with the community, working with organisations, sitting on committees, trying to make things happen. So I could clearly see myself in a role that would be something to do with the police, now the fire service, which is the police fire crime commissioner's role for North Yorkshire, which is a role which has been created. Whether it's right or wrong that it was created, it's there. I think it's very important. The chief constable, the chief fire officer should have somebody who can support them, who can fight the corner for them, can work with politicians, as I've done now for a lot of years, working with our constituency MP, Julian Smith, who is now Northern Ireland Secretary, working with other political parties, being flexible enough not to be rigid to one political party, but independent. I've always tried to remain independent, always tried to remain flexible, understanding also the social problems which I've had to work with, whether it be to do with mental health, whether it be to do with drugs problems. So we understand there's treatment, there's education with things, but there also is imposing the law, and I'm a great believer in that. So fairly recently I personally put up a reward for anybody who was caught or found to be convicted responsible for the persecution of protected birds, which there is a problem in North Yorkshire at the moment with birds of prey which are protected by law getting either shot or poisoned. And I actually put a reward up working with the RSPB and another businessman, which went to Crime Stoppers, which is still available, to try and say, education possibly for some people. Understand that these birds actually, if you allow them to fly in the skies, will actually bring benefits, and it won't affect your employment should you work in the shooting industry, should you be a gamekeeper. Education show that actually it will bring more benefits to your business, and it will bring tourism and things which actually create employment.
Let's talk about the MBE. It was 2018. How did you find out that you were getting, was it like a letter in the post with a royal seal on it? So talk us through the whole process.
Total shock, because clearly it's not something that you ever think that you're going to get. Certainly a lad coming from Leeds, going on this journey in life, which I love every minute of and still do every day. And this really, I suppose, was amazing, because I go home, I get this letter, open it up, and it all looks very official. And because I've quite often liaised with our sitting MP, I have received letters from him in the past, so I thought it was something most probably connected with something I'd been involved in, whether it's to do with bus services, local services in Nidderdale, and I thought possibly it's from Julian Smith's office. And as a result of that, I opened it. Suddenly it's from the Cabinet Office, and it's this, would you accept? Well, of course I'd accept it. And actually, it's one thing that does make me emotional, actually.
You got a tear in your eye.
Very, very proud. And I didn't tell Gloria for some time, because it says you mustn't tell anybody. If you do, it can potentially, it's saying you could jeopardise getting that award. So you really are frightened.
You didn't tell your wife about the most important letter you've ever received?
Not for some time.
How long is some time?
A few days, because I was contemplating, what do I do about this? I actually put it away in a drawer and was thinking about it, and I was driving along one day and thought, this is the moment, so I'll tell her.
Very good. Well, and then to Buckingham Palace, I presume?
Yeah, announced in the June Queen's Birthday Honours List 2018, a certain amount of media coverage, because very much a case of Sweet Shop Man gets the MBE, which was a story in itself, which is fantastic again, because which I didn't really answer you before, when my shop benefits, it benefits the whole area, because people come to buy a coffee, tea, pie, etc. So a lot of media coverage, and I then went to an investiture last November 2018 at Buckingham Palace, where I was honoured that Prince Charles awarded me with the MBE.
Now, I read a story about this. I think you know where I'm going to go. Did you offer Prince Charles a sweet whilst he was doing whatever he does with a sword or whatever they do?
Well, I like to keep happy and smiling, because I think that's one of the secrets of life. Even if you start to feel down, keep a bit happy and cheerful. And so I try to be cheerful. And when we went for the briefing at Buckingham Palace, it's all very well organised, a fantastic day. They really are good at what they do, and it makes you so proud to be British, seeing how organised, and see all the military and the beefeaters and all the different. It's an amazing experience, and to be in Buckingham Palace itself. So you're briefed and you're told whatever happens, you mustn't offer Prince Charles anything as he's talking to you, etc. You don't offer to even shake his hand until he puts his hand out. That's the end. He wants you to basically get on your way again. So you mustn't offer him anything. I thought it's sure to raise the fact when I go see him about the sweet shop. I'd been awarded it for my services to the community and business, because obviously, hopefully, as well as the community element to it, I've supported business to try and encourage growth, employment, etc., which we have done in Nidderdale. So I thought he'll mention the sweet shop. So I'd actually, just in case he did, I put 2 butterscotch sweets in my pocket, wrapped ones, the butterscotch, with the gold wrapper. So I thought, appropriate, gold sweet, just 2. And I thought, if he does say anything, I will say, well. So I went. My moment came, went up to him, and he said to me, gentleman who has the oldest sweet shop out here. And because I'd been told not to hand him anything or anything like that, I said, that's correct. I said, in fact, sir, would you like a sweet? I've got some in pocket. And I pretended or started to go to my pocket, and he went, no, you see. So he did laugh and chuckle, because I said, I was only joking. But I did have 2 sweets in case he said, give us one.
Thought you would. And how has that changed your life, if at all? I mean, do you wake up every morning and go, I've got an MBE? Or you having a shout, I have an MBE. Do you use it? I know you're very proud of it, as you should be, very deserving of it. You're not just someone who's done their job and, maybe wellness sports person, great, they've served the country and so on. You've gone beyond your job, you've helped others, you haven't got paid for it. you have this infectious personality, you work 7 days a week. You know, what do you think about this MBE? Is it something that defines you now?
I think it's certainly, I do think about it, and I'm conscious of it, because I think it also most probably makes you think, I've got to be careful what I do. Because I've now got this MBE, and I'm proud of it, and I think it's something that I am happy for people to say, yes, Keith Tordoff has an MBE, because if it helps, such as Dementia Forward as a patron, if it helps me possibly open the door to some business person or somebody in an organisation, if I'm using it for the right purpose to benefit organisations, benefit the community, then that's hopefully, I would have thought that's partly what that honour must be about. I believe that. It's not just for Keith Tordoff to sort of think, I've got this, that's the end of it. To me, I can hopefully, it sounds terrible, but I want to use it to open one or two doors to help things happen and to bigger and better things, because I'm still ambitious to do things. And you've drawn something, you know, to my attention, which is, I don't claim money for things. I don't work for any of these organisations for payment. I don't claim expenses. I don't claim it for using my car or my phone. And if I can use this MBE to try and make things happen and make life better, then I want to do. So I'm proud of it.
In a few years' time, it'll be the metropolis of Pateley Bridge. I think it's going to become, you know, maybe double, treble in size on your watch. Now, changing tack somewhat, Yorkshire is now synonymous with cycling. Fabulous, you know, the Grand Depart, or is it the Yorkshire cycling...
Tour de Yorkshire.
Tour de Yorkshire, of course, thank you. And more recently, and quite controversially, the UCI, which we had in sort of September 2019. Yes. Give us Keith Tordoff, MBE's viewpoint on all the cycling and how well it's been managed or not, the pros and cons for the business community and the road closures and so on. Just, you know, I'll give you your 5 minutes worth of cycling.
First thing that came was Tour de France. Absolutely amazing, fantastic. Brought it to Yorkshire. What an achievement, and we should always be grateful for that. Tour de Yorkshire, good follow on. Let's do it. I said, not being wise after the event, it really wants to be like the Olympics. Once every 4 years, not every year. You're going to get people. We all rose to the occasion for the Tour de France. We all rose to the occasion for the first Tour de Yorkshire, getting bikes made, putting bikes in window, getting woolly jumpers knitted, involving the community. Absolutely an amazing event and a great idea of keeping the legacy going with the Tour de Yorkshire. But once every 4 years, please. Businesses rise to the occasion. The public come out for it. Amazing. Once the organisers knew that they were getting the UCI, the World Championships, 3 years ago, somebody should have said, hang on a minute, we've got the Tour de Yorkshire run as well. Maybe we ought to now hold fast on that, not run that now for a couple of years. Not being wise after the event here, by the way, because people who know me will tell you I actually said this. I think it's about having a certain amount of vision, drive, leadership, and that sounds very arrogant and cocky, but I pride myself on that, recognising something different and doing things differently. So suddenly, we've got, not this year just the UCI, but we had the Tour de Yorkshire a few months before. So businesses who prepared, you've got to motivate people again. If you're trying to raise the PR on it, you've got to raise the PR side of it again. And the UCI, a lot of days, 9 days, because it isn't just 9 days. As an organiser of events, which I've organised many events for Nidderdale, such as the 1940s events, food festivals, farmers markets, as the organiser, you know that there's the days leading up to it, setting up, and the days after, taking it all apart. So it was always going to be at least 2 weeks, which is a massive disruption for an area. People organising it? I don't know. Have they done due diligence? Have they looked where it's taken place before? I wonder, in view of what's happened. And certainly, one area, I've never been a lover of putting something in one area, which is the idea of the fan zone. When I've organised 1940s events, if I put it in one area, people stay in that one area. If you've got a climate like ours and it rains and you're doing things on grass, you're going to get disruption, so you cover your bases, so you have things happening elsewhere and you create a trail, not just one area. So I think a massive mistake in relation to this so-called fan zone. I think massive mistake having people organising road closures who clearly weren't good at it. I would have involved the military. You've got an Army Foundation College near here, which with 3 years planning, you could have organised. Well-trained, disciplined, will listen to instructions, know how to deal with people on the barriers because they've been properly briefed. What did we get? We got chaos because of road closures, upsetting the goodwill of residents, businesses. So a bit of a PR disaster as far as I'm concerned. Then what do? We start talking about inquiries, employing large firms to do an inquiry which no doubt will cost £500,000, no exaggeration most probably, when we've got lots of local good firms of solicitors like your good selves at Truth Legal, McCormack's solicitors, massive firms who could have done this inquiry, I suspect, would have agreed to do a deal at a fraction of the cost that they're going to actually spend of taxpayers' money through Harrogate Borough Council, through North Yorkshire County Council. So it might sound controversial, but people need to put their hands up and accept. I believe the positives, yes, it puts the eyes of the world on the area, and hopefully that brings visitors and the later benefits. We all understood that with the Tour de France. We all understood it with Tour de Yorkshires. So it is a message that we've all been banging the drum for. It gets more and more difficult, and especially on the back of what is looking a little bit of a disaster when you're showing a fan zone that is a mud bath. And yes, it will recover, but in the meantime, we've got visitors who are coming to this district who've already booked to come here when children are back at school, when they want to enjoy time where it's a little bit less frenetic than the summer. And what have we got? We've got an eyesore for some time to come with fencing all around it, JCB diggers on it. Not the message you want to spread. Now, it wasn't just unlucky, it was bad planning, it was not thinking things out, and a certain amount of people who have got an ego, and it was more about that than actually making sure it was a successful and safe event. I qualify that by saying it was clearly safe. The police did their bit. Fantastic from a PR point of view for the police, because it shows them in a different light to this authoritarian role that you normally imagine a policeman, because a policeman on a motorcycle high-fiving people in crowds, great. A lot of benefits, but let's be truthful, let's do a proper investigation into it, and going forward, let's have some people, not politicians, people who've got vision, leadership, good business skills, who can actually deliver and cover these bases. Like, don't have just a fan zone, don't make a cock-up of blocking roads off everywhere. It became shut down for everywhere.
Now then, whilst you're in this mood, let me ask you about the contrast between the high street of Pateley Bridge today, which, as you say, is rammed with businesses. It's bucking the trend of other high streets, in particular Harrogate, where Harrogate has multiple businesses which are closed. So in Keith Tordoff's dictatorship of Harrogate, say, for want of a better expression, what would you do here in Harrogate? Because we've got lots of homeless people like I've never seen before, businesses closed like I've never seen before, and as a rates payer here, I am absolutely puzzled by the how high the rates are and how complicated they are to organise. We almost get a bill almost feels like every week for a different room in an office. It's complicated. How would you solve it, if at all?
Well, firstly, I wouldn't be a dictator.
I was pulling your leg. You're not dictatorship like at all.
As a solicitor, an unfortunate term of phrase.
It was. I retract that.
Thank you.
Not dictatorial. If you were sort of in charge, in a leadership police.
As I've shown in Nidderdale, I think it's very important that you work with people, and that's the churches, the businesses, the community, the retired, everybody. I think Harrogate, unfortunately, and it may sound controversial, are being led by the people who brought you the UCI, councils. Quite often councillors, they won't admit it, but they aren't necessarily, they're elected, so democracy is playing its part, but quite often they aren't necessarily the people with leadership, vision, the drive, the energy to actually make things work properly. I'm very sad to see Harrogate. Harrogate is a spa town and it lost sight of what it is. It decided it wanted to be something bigger and better and thought it could attract bigger and better. And what did it do? It went down that route, and unfortunately those people who are bigger and better business-wise, when it isn't quite ticking all the boxes in their offices, accountants' offices, they pull the plug on it and pull out, and that leaves empty shops. The rates clearly are a massive factor, as are the rents, but to then go for bid, which I'm not a lover of the bid system in places, I think it's another mechanism for trying to say to people, we need to give you more support and help. And quite often you've got that in place because the businesses who are strong, who have been here a long time, they should be leading. They should be standing out and being counted and saying, no, this is why we need to have a say, because we've been in business, we understand the needs of our visitors, our customers. A retailer, certainly, and a lot of businesses, face to face with customers, speak to them every day, so they understand what the problems are. People sat in their ivory towers, sat in council offices, etc., are listening to committees and people who quite often, they're not on the ground. You need to be on the ground. I would say bid is another level of bureaucracy, it's another cost for businesses. You employ more people, that costs more money. The business themselves it's again this message, it's a big picture, but the message of environmentally friendly transport, no parking. Sorry, we haven't got to that point yet. When we've got the infrastructure in place for all the environmentally friendly things such as electric charging points for vehicles, when we've got plenty of public transport, park and rides and things, fine, but don't start penalising the motorists, because at the moment Harrogate still relies on motorists coming into Harrogate, being able to park, being able to go and buy shopping, put it in the boot of the car. The people quite often who are attracted on public transport aren't going to purchase as much because they can't take it back on the bus with them. So let's be realistic about this, and never mind the fact that online has come along, people still like going to a shop, speaking to somebody, feeling product, talking about it, trying it. So my message would be, go back to basics. You're a spa town. Go back to basics. You've got independent shops. You've got some fantastic brands. Clearly people like Betty's, people who are in business. You've got Harrogate spring water. You've got the reputation of Harrogate water. So start building slowly. Create events which go into every sector of Harrogate, so the Montpellier quarter, the various quarters, create something that moves around. So if you've got musicians, they go to each of those areas. Homeless people, let's work with the police, let's work with the homeless charities, but also there's a certain amount of strength there needs to be, make it clear to those who are abusing it that that's not going to be tolerated in Harrogate, and the businesses certainly shouldn't have to tolerate turning up to find somebody sleeping in the doorway before they can open up, or having to walk over and to open the door to the premises and finding maybe there's litter, there's urine, there's cups, empty cups, etc. No, that isn't acceptable. But we can also be reasonable, but there's ways of doing it. And policing wise, that isn't being effective at the moment, because policing is the biggest part of that. We've always had homeless people, but homeless people, the police have known who they are, known the genuine cases, been able to help and support them. But the ones who are economic vagrants, basically, or people who are saying they're homeless, who are actually coming here in the cars or coming here on the train and then going back to the flat with £300 from collecting during the course of that day in Harrogate, no, they aren't to be tolerated, and they've got to be dealt with, and that's where the police come in. I could quite seriously sort Harrogate out, and I would start.
Bold claim.
It's a massive claim, but I would say that you've got to be driven, you've got to be passionate, you've got to get the business people on board. But I think there's a will there, certainly with a lot of the business people who now would come on board, because a lot are very suspicious of where this is going to go. And if we rely on the councils, I'm afraid I see it just deteriorating. Very controversial.
Controversial and almost a miserable no. I think we need to go somewhere more happy from here. Happiness. You've had a 40-odd year marriage, you said, I think 47 years or something, to Gloria. What are your tips for a happy, successful, lengthy marriage? Well, I'm assuming it's happy. It's certainly lengthy.
No, it's very happy. And I think the important thing is I'm not somebody to tell people how to either run their town, run the business, run the marriage or run the life. My relationship with my wife is one that, fortunately, she's got to be very understanding to live with me. She's got to be very tolerant to live with me. Even I think if she was here, she'd say to you, it's been a fantastic journey because she enjoys being part of it, because it's fun. We laugh. She's happy. When she's behind the shop counter, people hear her laughing halfway down the street because she is a cheerful person. We're very practical people, and again, that's another important thing. We're not interested in holidays. We haven't been on holiday for over 20 years, Andrew, and fortunately it's not just me, that my wife also, we're not really interested. Why? Because we've got a fantastic area. Do we need all this hassle of airports and travelling around and one thing? Go to London where it's mucky and dirty and one thing or other, or go back to Nidderdale where it's beautiful clean air, the purity of the water, the fact that we can breathe nicely and we've got fantastic food, everything on our doorstep, and the seasons changing, the beautiful tree colours and one thing or other. We're blessed. So me and Gloria realise and we recognise we're very blessed. And what are we to complain about? So the secret, great friends, partners, work together, understand each other, and be accepting sometimes I don't always get it right. I like to think I do, but I know myself I don't. And if I do get it wrong, Andrew, whoever it is, whatever it is, I'm always ready to say, I'm sorry, I got that wrong.
Great answer. Penultimate question, or nearly penultimate question. On this podcast, I've interviewed lots of business coaches. I very much like interviewing business coaches and hope to have many more on here. So I'm always asking, tips for business people. You're not a business coach. You've got the t-shirt, bought the t-shirt, made the t-shirt, sold the t-shirt. Now, what are your tips to people who are potentially thinking about setting up a business or running a business, finding it hard? What are your tips?
I think the first thing is that people, having been in the police, having been in banking, having been in organisations, sat on committees, been on executives, run retail business is hard. It's a tough one. Any retailer should be admired because it's hard on the old legs, standing up for number one. It's physically demanding generally. My tips are, you've got to be passionate about what you do. Easy to say, I know, but you really do, because if you've no real interest in it, it's soon going to show in your face that you're not happy, you're not smiling. I can go into our shop and smile every time because it makes me happy just looking at it, walking through the door and thinking, great. I know people when they walk through are going to think, wow, this is fantastic, I'm happy. So you've got to really have an interest and a passion in what you're doing, and the time you do is the time to get out. And because that is going to pass on to everybody that you employ, because if you're not happy, if you're not cheerful and not passionate about it, they're not going to be. So you need to pass that down to them and make them feel part of it. With business, you've also sort of accept sometimes you might end up paying people, certainly in retail, when you can't really pay yourself that week because it's been such a poor week. So you've got to keep this smiling, you've got to keep happy and just think the good times will come. And maybe I'm an eternal optimist because I'm always thinking there's going to be something good coming along, there's something even better coming along. And I still actually believe that for whatever reason. And I suppose that's why I'm still chasing, wanting to do things, still ambitious, because I just think it's fantastic. And be disciplined. I'm fortunately from my police background, I'm used to discipline, so if I have to be somewhere for 6 a.m. in the morning, I can be there for 6 a.m. in the morning. If I need to be somewhere at 3 a.m. in the morning, I'll be there at 3 a.m. So you've got to be disciplined. That's important because you can't have a business where you're not disciplined. Also, hopefully, integrity. You don't just sell somebody something for the sake of it. You trust in what you're actually selling, your product. You want to go home feeling that you've done something which has hopefully enhanced somebody else's life, whatever you've done in business, so that you can think, I've not ripped somebody off. I don't feel uncomfortable with what I've done today with that person. So if I have an issue, we do mail order from our business. If we send something out and somebody makes a complaint, I sort it out straight away. Send them more, refund them, whatever, because you'll get on from that. But cut them off before it escalates, because so many complaints escalate because people allow them to. And the old adage, talking, it's good to talk, it's good to compromise, and always be a bit flexible with your thinking. Don't be too rigid. Think about it and just think, well, I can be a little bit flexible with that, and I can move my position slightly. So I'm maybe not the best business person in the world, Andrew, I don't know, but here I'm happy, I live comfortably, I live a lifestyle that I know I can face myself and think, hopefully you've done some good. And through successful business, you can help so many people. And I think that's the nice thing about business. So when somebody does come along, and actually I think small retailers support local charities and local schools and things more than they do in the cities, because you're there, you're an easy person to come and see and have a chat with. Have you got something for the raffle, for the church, for the school? Have you got something for the Yorkshire Air Ambulance? Oh, fantastic. I love Yorkshire Air Ambulance and do such a great job. So there's so many people raising money, and you actually get quite a lot from a business, and at times it's a little bit testing. You're thinking, so how many more prizes am I giving out to various things? But as long as it's local, you can narrow it down that way. So support local charities, try and do that as much as possible, and you're going to get that back, because people will recognise that you've done the right thing for the things in the community, so the community get behind you and support you, and you need that as part of a businessman.
Playing the long-term game, very much so. Keith, what an absolutely fabulous answer to that very simple question. Thank you. And my last question is a bit of a throwaway one. Is it true that you eat, was it half a pound of sweets per day? Is that true?
Andrew, that is untrue. I eat a pound a day.
A pound a day? And you look so well.
Well, the reason is, and obviously I wouldn't recommend this to everybody, but I've always loved sweet. I've got a sweet tooth to put in my lip.
My listeners know that now.
Yeah, and because I'm constantly stocking jars in our shop, you've got to imagine a glass jar, which we do have glass jars in the shop. I like them looking full all the time, so the shop looks amazing. We've got about 200 glass jars on the shelf and different makers. So all these different sweets. And say I bring chocolate raisins down, which come in a bag to top up the jar. I shake as many as I can in, put the lid on, shake it again, try and get them in. There's only a few left in that plastic bag. I ain't going to take them back upstairs to my storeroom. I eat them. So the same applies then if it's milk gum teeth, which are my favourite sweet in the world. They've got to be powder coated, strawberry and vanilla. If I shake that jar, any excuse to eat a few milk gum teeth. My jelly beans, love my jelly beans, always have done. My torpedoes, I crunch sweets, and by crunching sweets I can get through them. So if I brought a jar down from upstairs to top up my glass jar, and I've topped them up and I can't get one more pear drop in that jar, and there's only a couple left in the jar, I'll eat those and crunch them, because I'm not going to take them back upstairs. So I'm sorry, it's a pound a day, and I don't recommend that for anybody, but it gives me lots of energy and drive.
I can see that, and your teeth are all intact as well. Keith, what a fabulous way to end what is an absolute fabulous podcast, I hope. I very much enjoyed it. Thank you very much for your time today, and I wish you really well with whatever the next thing is that you do. But I don't think I've ever interviewed anyone with so much energy. So whatever it is you're going to do next, I'm sure you'll bring all your drive, enthusiasm, intellect, personality to it. I'm very grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew.